Ladies and gentlemen, just before we start another episode of the Fitzness Academy podcast, if you are listening on YouTube, please do be aware that we are now on Spotify. So if you want to listen to this uninterrupted whilst you're on a car journey or anything, please head over to our Spotify channel and check us out there. On with the episode. It's almost like trying to start a car with no keys. You know, you need that initial motivation to try and get you going, you know, and there's going to be things that you know, you're going to be driving that car and it's going to be a little bit bumpy along the road, but you know, you got to start somewhere. So and normally the start point for that comes from the initial motivation or the initial drive to try and achieve something. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Fitzness Academy Podcast. This is episode number 27. We're using a brand new platform for the moment, and we're trying to test it and see how it's going. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, you can hear me a little bit better, you can see me a little bit better. I don't think you would want to see me a bit better. But yeah, obviously we want to try this new platform, see how it goes. Looks brilliant so far, so let's see and continue how this goes. But yeah, welcome to the newest episode. I've been very, very humbled and very, very sort of grateful at the same time by the amount of support we've been given recently. You know, the number of views that we've been getting may not seem that that's the case, but definitely I'm very, very grateful for the people that have shared, commented, liked the podcast, you know, even shared on social media. You know, it doesn't have to be the YouTube one, shared on social media so people click on, and that's brilliant to see. So and the subscriber count as well, it keeps going up, which is brilliant. So thanks so much for that. So yeah, just before we start today's podcast, I want you guys to let me know if you want to see anyone in particular on the podcast, because I love doing these episodes where I just sit down and talk to everyone. But you know, I think a lot of people will tend to realize that you're more probably likely to listen to a podcast because someone is got a new story or someone's got something to say. So definitely, please do let me know if you want to see anyone in particular, and I'll send them a message or send them an email, and hopefully, fingers crossed, they can come on. But yeah, on with today's episode. So what are we talking about? I've talked about a lot of stuff so far, but definitely this is one of the simpler ones, I would say. So talking about motivation. So mainly, what is your motivation for doing whatever you do? Now, you may be wondering, well, James, I'm not working the job I want to work at, so I've not really got any motivation. Well, I'm not just talking about for work. You know, it could be for exercising, it could be for, you know, doing whatever, playing video games. You know, people are doing that for a job as well. So definitely don't think that it's just for work, that, you know, it's for everything, for life in general, you know, and this is aside from obviously a lot of stuff with mental health and stuff like that, but it's just solely a motivation. So I'm going to try and stick to that as much as I can, because I think that it's almost like trying to start a car with no keys. You know, you need that initial motivation to try and get you going, you know, and there's going to be things that you know, you're going to be driving that car and it's going to be a little bit bumpy along the road, but you know, you got to start somewhere. So and normally the start point for that comes from the initial motivation or the initial drive to try and achieve something. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more today. So yeah, starting off with sort of what are the types of motivation. So normally there are two types, and again, I'm not a doctorate in psychology. You know, I've got a degree in sport and exercise science, so we have done a lot of psychology throughout the time. So I have a very, very, very basic understanding as to psychology and to motivation. So starting us off, extrinsic motivation. So extrinsic motivation comes from anything that sort of is an external reward, or gives you an external sort of feeling, whereas to like you're trying to achieve something for a certain something. So whether that be money, whether that be an object, a prize, or something like that, that is extrinsic motivation. So an example for that could be you working to get more money. That is an extrinsic motivation. Money. Trying to sort of win a prize if you're competing in sports, that could be extrinsic motivation. Again, whether it be money or a medal or things like that. And yeah, so anything that you can kind of get sort of a prize from. So like, for example, if say James run 100 meters, if whoever, and then you're running against this guy, if you win, you get this mug. And then I'm saying, right, I'm going to win this sort of race to get that mug. That is extrinsic motivation. On the flip side of that, intrinsic motivation, that comes from within. Intrinsic motivation comes within, and that's your inner feeling to try and achieve something for yourself, or for a feeling that you're getting. So for me personally, seeing all of the athletes of the Fitzness Academy having the sticker on their bats, and then seeing a photo when they score 100 or they take some wickets, that is extrinsic motivation for me, because I see the pride of the Fitzness Academy being out there to the masses. So for me, that is extrinsic motivation. What else could it be? So something maybe similar, sticking with sport, could be something like a time. We had Joe on, and he was saying about achieving, I think it was under 45 seconds or 45:15, something like that. For him, that's extrinsic motivation, because he's not getting a prize necessarily from achieving that time, but there's a specific thing in him which he knows that he needs to achieve that time. Again, whether that is sort of to do extrinsically because he's trying to achieve a place at the Commonwealth Games, or sorry, he has already in the time of recording this, or sort of he's trying to get a medal at those Commonwealth Games. The medal obviously is extrinsic, but the intrinsic motivation is definitely sort of achieving that time, and for him knowing the satisfaction that he's achieved that time, because it's not a physical thing. A time isn't a physical thing. It's something which sort of for him is, it's so sort of within himself, because he knows if it's good or he knows if it's bad, because it's obviously very individual. So obviously now that you know both of those, it's a bit of a bizarre topic to talk about, because without talking to someone about it, it's very sort of my opinion based. But sort of for you, for the audience listening, when should you be one of these two things? Now, this isn't going to be an extremely long podcast, because obviously there's very, very few things to talk about, but it's so important, because like I mentioned, you need that initial starting point, or there may be a time where you feel like you sort of need a bit more motivation, and possibly are you looking at motivation in the wrong way? Sort of for a lot of people, they may be in a job for money, which is, again, perfectly fine. I'm not going to judge anyone based on what their motivation is, but if someone's in a job for money solely, and yes, money does make the world go round, that could lead them down the wrong spiral. But then vice versa, if they're in the job just for the joy of it, but they're not achieving enough money to survive, that on that same way is going to cause a lot of issues. So having the right motivation there at the right times is the most important thing, and I think that's one thing that is going to be the base of this episode, is understanding that you can have both. You can definitely have both types of motivation, but you need to have it in the right way. So I don't know if you can hear that alarm, by the way. I apologise. Hopefully that goes off ASAP. But yeah, when I carry on talking. So let's take Bob, for example. Bob is working at a 9-to-5 job, but he loves it. But he's only just on minimum wage. Okay, I don't know where minimum wage is, wherever you're listening to, but let's use that for example. Okay, so extrinsic motivation for him is definitely sort of something for him which he doesn't need. He's got it because he loves the job. Whereas sort of on the flip side of that, intrinsically, he knows that he's 100% sorted because he loves his job. That's perfectly fine. So now let's take Steve, for example. Steve's working the exact same job. He absolutely hates it, but he's on a hell of a lot more money than Bob. Excuse me. So he's on a hell of a lot more money than Bob. Now, which one is happier? Which one is happier than the other one? Because one of them has an extrinsic motivation to get the money, or money in the bank, whereas the other one is working intrinsically to sort of enjoy his job. So which one is happier? And that's the very, very, very pardon the pun, $1 million question. Because how can someone be both happy and sort of wanting to get more money? Well, this is the interesting question. And it's something which obviously the only person who can sort of say that is yourself. Now to a lot of people, they're very, very content with sort of working a job which they love, but it isn't going to give them sort of enough money, or not, maybe not enough money, but as much money as another job, but they want to stay in that job because they love it, which obviously I can relate to a lot based on sort of the salaries that I would go into as a strength and conditioning coach, in sort of working for clubs and things like that. Don't get me wrong, it's a decent amount, but you can sort of work in the private sector and get more, but it depends, and that's obviously individually down to yourself based on what you want to do, because it's a very, very fine line between doing what you want to do and having the sort of space to change jobs based on that extrinsic motivation. So that's the important thing. Ladies and gentlemen, sorry to interrupt this episode of Fitzness Academy Podcast, but I just wanted to remind everyone that if you haven't seen on our Instagram, we are now looking for sponsors for each episode of the Fitzness Academy Podcast to help grow your business and to help this podcast grow even further. So if you know anyone, or you are sort of running a small business yourself and looking to expand it, please do send us an email or send us a direct message on any other social media channels, and we'll try and arrange something for you. On with the episode. Now, team, I cannot really sort of tell you sort of when to sort of change job necessarily in this example, or sort of when to change your motivation round. But from the short period of time that I've been sort of in jobs and things like that, where you sort of may be focusing on for different reasons, whether it's because you enjoy it or because you get more money, I couldn't tell you, because there's been times where sort of I've achieved both when I've been sort of working jobs which I don't particularly want to work when I was younger, before I was qualified, sort of working as like lifeguard and things like that, working in restaurants, where sort of that goal is extrinsic. It's to achieve some money and to hopefully, fingers crossed, sort of do a job later on down the line, sort of like an internship like I did, so I have that money to support myself, which obviously an internship is purely intrinsic, because obviously I'm not achieving any external sort of reward from it in terms of sort of financial, but internally I know that I've achieved a hell of a lot of experience from it. So I have done both, and I have sort of had both motivations there. You might not even realize it, that your sort of motivation is extrinsic, because you're in such a sort of a headspace where you're getting down, you're doing your work, sort of to be able to sort of support yourself or support your family or whatever it may be, where you purely just sort of, you get your head down, like I mentioned, and you just work, and you don't even realize it at the time. So then once that day comes to an end, where you're not working sort of anymore in terms of sort of the 24 hours speaking here, you kind of almost maybe feeling a bit of a rut, because you're not working, so you feel like you may be sort of wasting your time, or you're not working, you're not earning. So again, so without even thinking about it, having an extrinsic motivation may sort of have a bit of a factor into how you feel outside of work, and that's the most important thing for me. So when I was working those sort of extrinsically motivated jobs, like lifeguarding, like working at receptions, working in restaurants, although it was essential for me, I almost felt like the feeling I got after the job, yes, it was good, because obviously I'd earned this money, and when we got the paycheck and I sent it to sort of my mum so we can put it away for savings, it was brilliant. But then after every shift, you're almost like, well, what am I doing this for? And obviously I knew exactly what it was. I knew exactly what the feeling was of earning that money and being able to support myself whilst being at university, and do these internships and gain experience where I want to gain experience. So hopefully one day, potentially in the next 12 or 13 months, I can go into a job and say I've got 3 or 4 years experience I need for this job, or feel like I can do this job. A lot of people, again, don't understand, like, for an intrinsically motivated sort of job, you sometimes need to sort of have a feeling where you don't have that extrinsic reward, and you're like, James, what on earth are you on about? Well, I had times during my internship, although I absolutely loved 99% of that internship, there were times where you put in all those hours and you don't see any physical reward from it. You don't see any reward from all those hours. And I spoke to sort of my mentor or my boss, whichever one you would call him, and I was like, I'm getting this feeling where sort of you get a bit sort of upset with yourself, or you get a bit down because you're like, well, I'm doing all these hours and I'm gaining all the experience, and internally I know how much it's helping me, but extrinsically at the end of the month you don't see anything, and then you're like, you have this almost feeling of not imposter syndrome, but like you do get this feeling like, well, I'm working but I'm not really working, and it's tough to try and put that into perspective, because you can't sort of change motivations, because you know that long term the intrinsic motivation you get from doing an internship is going to help you later on down the line when potentially you do have that job and you can sort of support yourself and be like, right, cool, when I did this for 3 years without any sort of extrinsic motivation or extrinsic factor, and now you can sort of say you're intrinsically motivated for sure, because the sort of extrinsic reward takes care of itself. So it's kind of that balance, and I almost think from the experiences that I've gained so far, I think you can kind of have both in a very bizarre way, where you internally you feel like you are really enjoying your job, and then you have that extrinsic sort of factor, and you've got that extrinsic motivation to worry about sort of whether that's financial, whether that's sort of, I don't know, because you want to achieve a medal or things like that. So having that in perspective is really important, and you see it a lot with athletes as well, sort of when they finish a race and they just won a gold medal and you're like, well, that time was terrible. Well, they've just won a gold medal and they're still sort of worrying about their intrinsic motivation of trying to achieve a better time. So for me personally, I don't think you can have one or the other in certain instances. Like I mentioned with Bob and Steve at the beginning of the podcast, having one or the other will be the case if you do have like that 9-to-5 job where you're like, right, I'm just doing this job to get money and to support my family, which again is completely fine, and it has to be done sometimes. Whereas you get sort of Bob on the other hand, who just works because he loves it and he's not worried about the sort of how much he's getting in the bank, which again is fine, but again it may sort of be a bit of an issue later on down the line, which again I'm not really one to put into perspective because I haven't really sort of worked sort of full time yet, but sort of it's the basics of the basic crux of it. So and again, I can't tell you, right, you need to leave job because you're not happy with it, or you need to leave job because you're not earning enough, because that's not my place to say. But the only thing I can say is that if you're in a position where sort of you can sort of have the intrinsic motivation to go to work, to enjoy it, while at the same time you have that intrinsic motivation of being able to earn more money to be able to take your family on holiday, you're winning. Again, I cannot sort of tell you to change jobs because you don't like it, but because sometimes, it's out of people's hands. I could potentially come out of university and not get a job straight away and have to do another job. Hoping that's not the case, and I'm working as hard as I can to make sure that's not going to happen. But, I need to have that in the back of my mind where, people need to sort of do sort of part-time jobs on the side of doing another part-time job to be able to do what they want to do, plus have the extrinsic sort of motivation cleared and in place to be able to support themselves in life, whether that be for rent, again, taking family on holiday, eating, things like that. So yeah, and like I said, can you sort of change both and have one or the other? In terms of work, I don't think so. In terms of if you're an amateur athlete and you want to sort of achieve a gold medal, or you want to achieve a certain time, then in that sense you can sort of stick to one. You can stick to either having extrinsic or intrinsic. Now, which one is best? You would have to do a bit more research in that sense and as to which one is better for you. But I think it's so individual because, and again, it depends on different sport. For something like cricket, where almost the rewards are almost the same, which is getting wickets, getting runs, getting catches, or getting dismissals if you're a wicket keeper. That's very different to someone like Joe, who's a runner, or to Will, who's a triathlete, where it's all time-based, or most of it is time-based, the race, where you achieve a certain time. If the time is quicker than someone else's, you win the gold medal, you win the silver, you win the bronze, or you come first, second, or third. Now, again, I cannot sort of tell you which one is better because I think it's so individual. For me personally, I used to be so sort of intrinsically motivated, where I was like, performed so bad, or yeah, I've got 2 wickets, but I feel terrible. Like I feel like I played terrible. For me, that is that used to sort of haunt me and really, really caused me some tough times, because I was performing all right on paper, and I was getting wickets and I was scoring a bit of runs, but I never ever sort of felt like I was intrinsically motivated, because even though I love the sport and that was my intrinsic motivation, the extrinsic motivation of taking wickets and scoring runs weren't there. So I had to take a bit of time off and understand why I was playing the game. Was I playing the game to take wickets and take runs? Score runs? No, I was playing the game because I love the game. That is my intrinsic motivation. So then it took me a long time to understand that that's different sports sort of require different levels of motivation. Someone like Joe can be purely intrinsically motivated, like I previously mentioned, where he wants to achieve his certain time, which again, perfectly fine. And I think that's maybe what the case is. But him saying to me that he wanted to achieve a medal at the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham this year, that is obviously extrinsically motivated. So again, he has both those types of motivations there with him. So I don't think you could probably have one or the other. But then I think it's down to you to understand sort of how much one or the other takes over, because whether you think about it or not, I think it's still there, and that may take a bit of time to think about or to understand, but sort of take a think back and think, right, am I enjoying my job? Am I enjoying my sport? Yes, that is my intrinsic motivation. Am I doing it for financial, am I thinking about financial reasoning? Am I thinking about gaining more money, or am I thinking about getting a medal, or am I thinking about going from a bronze to a silver, or a silver to a gold? That is your extrinsic motivation. If you have that thought at any stage, that is your extrinsic motivation. And you're like, oh, James, you're right. Well, but I love it, but I want to achieve a medal at the same time. You got both. And I think when I was being taught motivation in my psychology lectures, I never really sort of thought, right, yeah, you could have both. You probably normally have one or the other. Well, I've just kind of sort of explained it in that sense, and I think now saying this to you guys gives me a better sense as to motivation in general, even for myself. That's why I love doing this podcast so much, because I actually end up learning myself, like from talking about things and to getting a clearer mind about things. So for myself at the moment, for example, I'm doing the job that I love to do. But then at the same time, I'm gaining that sort of extrinsic sort of factor in terms of finances, and that's taken care of. So yes, I've got both types of motivation. I don't really think about the latter one of those in the extrinsic form, but I'm intrinsically motivated. I'm loving my job, and I'm doing what I love to do. So yeah, I'm intrinsically motivated right now, but that external sort of factor is being thought about, so it's there. I'm not thinking about it too much, but it's there. I'm thinking about it, so it's there on the side. So like I said, it's there on the side. And like the analogy that I said before in terms of having motivation, I'm going to repeat it because a few of you might have sort of forgotten about it. Motivation is needed to get you going. It's like almost trying to start a car with no key. It's like almost trying to start rowing a boat without any oars. Okay, you need that initial motivation to get you there, whether that is extrinsic from within or external from an external source. That is up to you, and that's up to you to decide, because at the end of the day, it's so individualized that because you're the one that has to work for it. If you don't want to work for it and you sort of are naturally gifted, that's perfectly fine. It's not the way that I would go about things, but again, so individual that no one else can teach you that. They can explain the theories to you like I'm doing to you now, but at the end of the day, it's down to you to decide whether your motivation to start your car is from an external source, like racing to achieve first place or to get there the quickest that you can, or whether your motivation is internal to just to drive for as long as you can, or to enjoy the feeling of driving your car. Okay, that's your feeling. It's a bit of a weird analogy, but it's the analogy that I like to use to help me push on and to help inspire as many people as I can. So that is the easiest way of explaining it in that sense, where you need to have your motivation for keeping that car going as long as you can. And like I mentioned, taking a sip of my coffee. It's needed. Whether your car journey is, just dropped my phone. Whether your car journey is 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 years, 5 months, whatever it is, the motivation you have will sort of help you continue that as long as you can. So for me personally now, going to Loughborough University, official announcement on the podcast, in September, that's the internal motivation is keeping my car journey going throughout the summer months where I'm working in this job now, even though I'm loving it. So I'm so excited, and it's been my dream for so long to go there, that I now know that I'm getting a bit impatient, and I'm getting to a stage where I need to sort of keep my car journey going as long as I can. So that internal motivation is the intrinsic motivation is keeping me going. But yeah, and then on the flip side, I am gaining that sort of external reward from finances from the job that I'm working to help me get there and to help me sustain myself whilst I'm there. So yeah, that is the case. And like I said, ladies and gents, if your car journeys feel like you're slowing down, you need to stop at the side to go and get some petrol to try and keep your car journey going as long as you can. Again, that's perfectly fine. I've taken many sort of little mini breaks to try and help me sort of with my mental health and with my sort of overall journey to get there. You need to understand that, yes, motivation can keep you going, and it can start your car engine journey, like the analogy I've just mentioned, or sort of your initial motivation can help you start that car. But everyone has to take a stop at the petrol station in order to keep going. Everyone needs to refuel, reset, and have a little break before that they can continue their journey wherever they want to be. You know, everyone's journey is probably a little bit different, so having that perspective and needing to take a break and understanding that you need to take a break every so often is important. Again, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but I think so many people are so head down and so focused, like no, work, and I've been guilty of that in the past. That, you know, I've never really stopped and taken the time out to appreciate that I need to refill the engine sometimes. I need to charge myself up. If you're an electric car, if your people are saying, well, James, no, I have an electric car, well, it's the same principle. You need to charge the car up eventually. So yeah, that's the crux of it, and that's what you need to focus on, because if you're losing the motivation to do something, then that's probably the time that you need to sort of stop on the side and take a break. Because although I love doing these podcasts, and I haven't lost that love just yet, there may be a time where the intrinsic motivation sort of is there, but because I don't get paid to do these podcasts, and I don't really focus too much on the views necessarily, I am so extrinsically motivated. But you know, that may come into a fact, like, oh, why has this podcast got a little bit less views than the other one? Well, that then it's become extrinsic, and I need to sort of take a break and understand why I'm actually doing it in the first place, which normally it definitely sort of comes into fact, and I'm like, right, James, stop being so silly, right? Remember, you were intrinsically motivated to start this at the start. Why are you going to change that now? Even if we get to a stage where potentially this could sort of become something which is sort of a profitable thing, and I would never ever lose that, because as soon as I start to lose the love for something, and you've heard it from Dan, you've heard it from Alex as well, sort of guys I've had on the podcast before, and a couple of others as well. As soon as you lose the love for something, you're never going to be able to perform as well as you can, whether that is in a working sense, whether that's doing this like for myself, whether you are an athlete as well. As soon as you lose the love for something, it's going to be 10 times harder, and it's almost going to feel like your car weighs way more than it actually is. So that's so important to understand, team, that, you know, you need to, if you really love something and you want to achieve something, the extrinsic motivation probably needs to be there beforehand. Someone like Joe, and I can't quote myself on this, who possibly is having some endorsement deals with brands to do stuff or to do some appearances, sort of that might help him sort of with his sort of achieving his dream of medaling at the Commonwealth Games. But his intrinsic motivation to start running and to keep running is what keeps him going. Because look, he's got a master's degree in media now, so he doesn't need to. He does running because he loves it. He gets sort of that extrinsic reward because he's bloody good at what he does, but his intrinsic sort of motivation is always there. He's just going to have a bad race and potentially that's going to take a little bit of a hit, but he'll always keep going because he realised why he started. So that's the important thing. Realising why you start something is that intrinsic motivation that a lot of people have before they ever earned a penny from it. For myself, if doing 2 or 3 internships with absolutely no external reward is intrinsically motivated, which pushes me on to getting more experience and eventually achieving a job. So that at the end of the day is the definition of how you should probably live. But again, like I said, everyone's different, and like I said, life happens and you need to possibly look at other means of achieving sort of an external reward, because you've got a family, so you might need to do a job which earns more money. But that's what life is. You need to be able to sort of take life as it comes, and understanding that changing jobs to get a bigger external reward, just it might happen, but you need to like be open to that and take life day by day. Because if you are like, well, in 20 years time my child's going to go to university, so I need to earn way more money now to be able to support them. Well, you never know that you might get a bonus at work, you might get a sort of a pay rise, so you need to sort of realize that sort of taking life day by day is probably a bit more efficient than thinking way too far ahead. I put a post out yesterday, and I'll put it on the screen now, where it was sort of saying like, predictions make your mission like 10 times harder. I don't think that's the exact one, but like it's along those lines. Predicting something makes that mental battle 10 times harder than it needs to be, because you're worrying about every single factor that comes into play. Like, again, control the controllables, like a couple of my best mates say. So yeah, that's it. And I'm going on a bit of a tangent again, but this is the beauty of the podcast. I can say whatever I want. You guys can listen to me. And again, you might have clicked off by now. You might want to click off saying, James, you're going on a tangent. What are you doing? You're talking about motivation, and now you're talking about control the controllables. What's going on? But no, obviously have that initial bit of motivation, whichever one it is, but stick to it and follow it all the way through. And again, if you need to take a pit stop and change, please do by any means, because a lot of people, they're vice versa. They can be working a job which is giving them a hell of a lot of money, but they don't enjoy it, and they change over. Again, that's perfectly fine, but it's down to you to decide which one you want to use, okay, or which type of motivation you want to have. So hopefully, fingers crossed, guys, you've learned something from this episode, and you can take it away and think, right, let's have a bit of a think based on what James has said, and can I adapt and become better at that? So that's pretty much it for this episode of the Fitzness Academy Podcast, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and hopefully you've learned something from it, and you can take something away and better yourself, because that's the goal at the end of the day from speaking to you here. I sat down for a little bit of time and speaking to you. Hopefully I can help you either achieve your goals, or to help you sort of make a little bit of a change, or to help you improve and become a better person at the end of the day. So thank you so much for listening, guys. Please don't forget to like the video, share it to your friends and family, leave a comment if you've got any suggestions, or if you've got any feedback for me, and go down in the comments and let me know who you want to have on the podcast, and hopefully I can make that a possibility. So thank you very much, guys, for listening, and stay tuned for another episode of the Fitzness Academy Podcast next Sunday at 6 p.m. Thanks so much, guys. Take care.